Hey friends, this is part 2, chapter 10 of 1984. Alright, so, usually ahead of time, I know what song I'm going to play in the intro, and I plan accordingly, and sometimes I groove along with it, and sometimes, I can drum a little bit of it depending on what the song is, and this time, for the first time, I don't know what song's going to go in that space. So what I did there is actually just introduced where we are in the novel, and then I just paused. I just waited a certain length of time so that I can input a song in there afterwards, and who knows what it's going to be. So I can't groove along to nothing. And I can't drum along to nothing because I don't know what song's going to go in there. And if you've been watching my videos religiously, it's getting really, really difficult to pick new artists that don't have some sort of copyright issue through YouTube. So who knows what it's going to be. And what it's come down to is that it's not the videos themselves that take time to go through and add in all the PowerPoint slides and all that kind of stuff afterwards. What actually takes a long time is actually just picking an artist to put at the beginning of these songs, or at the beginning of these videos. It's becoming so difficult. Everybody has some copyright thing through YouTube, and it's driving me crazy. Anyway, so who knows? Who knows what song will go at the beginning? Maybe I'll do something a little bit silly. Who knows? So we're in over a month into this coronavirus stuff, and I see a lot of really motivational stuff on Instagram now. A lot of people doing crazy workouts, and just eating right and baking good stuff, cooking good stuff. And here I am with my sour cream and onion chips. And I don't feel bad about it. I'm going to eat what I want to eat. And no one's going to tell me otherwise. My wife said, "Are you really going downstairs to do a recording with a bag of chips?" Yep. I most certainly am. And I already finished off the, I don't know if you've ever had the Hell of a Good dip. It's really good. But I finished that off already, so I have to eat these chips just the way that they are. But normally I'd give it a little dip. Anyway, it was a much bigger bag while I had the clip. And it's dwindled down to just the crumbs here. All right. Hey, did you read the 41 pages of part 2, chapter 9? If you did, you shouldn't have, because I never asked you to. So, in our course pack, we have I very generously read through the 41 pages and summarized those 41 pages for you into 2 pages in our course pack. So navigate to that if you haven't already, and check out the summary of those 41 pages. Essentially what happens in those 41 pages, I'm not going to go through it all over again. It defeats the purpose of dwindling it down for you in 2 pages in the course pack. So I'm not going to do that. But it's really just Winston obtaining the copy of Goldstein's book, just like O'Brien promised him, and reading through it. He spends the majority of those 41 pages just reading it out loud to Julia, who doesn't care about it, and just reading it out loud. If I'm being really honest with you, I've been teaching 1984 now for about 8 years, and I've only read through that chapter twice. Once with my class for the very first time, which was a huge mistake. And then I told myself I'm not doing that ever again. And then I had to read through it a second time on my own in order to summarize it into those 2 pages in your course pack. So, there you go. All right. Now what? Part 2, chapter 10. Let's get right into it. Another short chapter. So with the exception of chapter 9, I think chapters like 6, 7, 8, and 10 were extremely short, or at least 7, 8, and 10 were very, very short chapters. So there wasn't much to unpack, as we say. But chapter 10, this is the last chapter of part 2, by the way, and pretty exciting. Again, by this point, you should have read it, so you know what's exciting about it. And if for whatever reason you haven't read the pages and you're watching this first, like a weirdo, then be prepared. I hope you're sitting down. Be prepared to be shocked by what happens. Most of you know what happens. All right. I get it. I can almost see you and hear you through the screen. You're like, get on with it. So, here we go. Chapter 10 takes place in the room above Mr. Charrington's shop. As you can imagine, those last few chapters, that's where the majority of those chapters take place, which is Winston in that room above Mr. Charrington's shop, along with Julia, where they can talk and so on. What kind of takes center stage, so to speak, in the first part of this chapter is the singing prole woman, who we were introduced to many, many chapters ago. She continues to sing that really, really depressing song, but singing it so beautifully. And that's not even really what draws Winston to the singing prole woman. He looks outside. They've slept. Winston and Julia have slept until 8:30 in the evening. And Winston gets up and he hears her singing, and he looks out the window at her, and he comments on how beautiful she looks. And as we know, because I not only told you, but you made a note on it chapters ago, that the singing prole woman represents 2 things, which is strength and fertility, and that's exactly what Winston comments on here. That although she may be a big woman, again, we talked about what her strength really represents. And that's not only the strength in numbers that the proles have, but just her actual physical strength. That someone like the singing prole woman looks drastically different than even someone like Winston, who has become rather frail, despite the fact that he's only 39 years old. So that's one thing. And again, she continues to sort of peg up diapers, so we know why fertility is so important. And as it says here on the slide, the idea that she can give birth to as many children as she wants, to raise them the way that she wants, something that he wishes he and Julia would be able to experience as well. And of course, because Julia and just her character in general, not a very deep character in terms of just how deeply she thinks. She is quite surface level, She really doesn't understand the emotions and the feelings that Winston often feels towards different things. A great example is from a couple of chapters ago with telling her about Jones, Aronson, and Rutherford and having that photograph in his hands. She just doesn't understand the emotion behind it. And so to hear when Winston comments on the singing prole woman being beautiful, Julia's first reaction is just to comment very surface level on just how fat she is. Julia's exact words are, she's a meter wide across the hips, right? In other words, she's fat. How can you find her beautiful? And Winston again has to try and explain to Julia where he's coming from with his emotions, to say, that's her type of beauty. It represents a certain strength, which Julia maybe just can't understand. Good. So let's just fast forward a little bit to page 30, and this is the part that's incredibly alarming. And on page 230, Winston comments again, "We are the dead." And the slide here, of course, explains again what exactly that means. "We are the dead" just means that Winston and Julia know that the process of being captured, tortured, and killed has begun. It is inevitable. And so Winston just so happens to say it again, "We are the dead." Knowing that the process has begun. Julia repeats it right after him, and then a third voice repeats it back. And that's the moment where we're like, whoa, what is happening? And as a teacher, somebody that has taught this novel for many years, for me, that's a part of the novel where, as I'm reading it to the class, the look on students' faces, those that are, of course, are invested in the novel and what's happening, that's where, the reaction that I get from students is actually so wonderful, because it's so genuine, the surprise. And so for all of you that have read this part at home, I'm not privy to those reactions, which really sucks. But there is obviously some really genuine surprise here, like, oh, shoot, like, what is happening here? They're busted, essentially. And so a third voice says, "You are the dead." The voice tells them not to move, that the house is surrounded, and like I said, they're busted. So as it turns out, and maybe many of you saw this coming, as it turns out, there was a telescreen behind the picture of the old church, the one that was hanging in that room above Mr. Charrington's shop. There was a telescreen behind it the whole time, and so whoever's listening on the other end may not have been able to see Winston and Julia. Certainly, whoever's listening in has been able to hear the things that they have been talking about this whole time. And so just to confirm, there is a telescreen behind that old photograph. And the irony of that scene, and there's a couple of things that are ironic about it, and maybe you picked up on it, maybe you didn't. The irony is that earlier on in the novel, Julia comments on the picture frame itself, and she says, "I want to take the picture off of the wall one of these days because there's probably bugs behind it." And of course, the irony in that if she had done that so long ago, the telescreen would have been found out. I don't know how that would have worked out in their favor, but at least they would have figured it out sooner rather than later. So she comments, "I want to take the picture frame down. There may be bugs behind it." And certainly a different kind of bug is behind it for sure. And of course, what's really ironic about it as well is that Mr. Charrington offers the picture frame, the picture in the picture frame, to Winston way back in part 1, chapter 8, when he buys the coral paperweight. Mr. Charrington offers to take the picture frame down off the wall and sell it and sell it to Winston if he's interested in it. And Mr. Charrington makes the comment, I'd have to unscrew it, of course, but I could do it if you want. And it's kind of interesting. It's almost like Mr. Charrington knowing who he is at the end of this chapter. It's almost like Mr. Charrington knew that Winston wasn't going to take the risk by asking him to take it down off the wall. So, of course, the irony in that Mr. Charrington the whole time knew that there was a telescreen behind it and offered the picture frame anyway, to which Winston, of course, declined. And like you should know already, so it's not like it was ruining anything, guards burst in through the window, through the door of the room, and Winston and Julia essentially are caught. Julia is eventually hit really, really hard in the stomach, and they carry her out of the room, and Winston is just standing there, frozen. And in through the door comes Mr. Charrington, and it's revealed that he has been a Thought Police member all along. And that's another big reveal and another big uh-oh moment. And so this is not good. This is not good for Winston. So it is confirmed that Mr. Charrington is a member of the Thought Police, and that should, unless you saw it coming, but depending on how invested you are in the novel, that should have been a moment for you that really turned the novel kind of upside down for you, I'm sure. And really the last thing that I wanted to talk about is that one of the guards smashed the coral paperweight on the ground, and it just shatters to pieces. And there's symbolism behind that. As we talked about the coral paperweight, it kind of shifted in its meaning over the course of the novel. It started out as symbolizing beauty, history. My son's crying about something. Oh, it's his, it's almost his nap time, so he's probably crying because he has to go take a nap. But yeah, the coral paperweight, it represented beauty and history, and then as the chapters went on, it eventually kind of came to represent this idea of paradise, right? This kind of enclosed area where only he and Julia belong and live together and experience paradise of being free. So the fact that one of the guards smashes the coral paperweight seems to indicate, of course, that this blissful paradise just won't happen. It won't happen. It won't continue. Their lives together end now, since they, of course, will be captured. And so that the symbolism there of the coral paperweight breaking is just that the end to their lives together, which is so sad. And that's really it. That kind of concludes, it concludes part 2 for us, and again, the idea just moving into part 3 now is we know that they've been captured, and the only 2 parts of the process left is to be tortured and to be killed. So I guess we got that to look forward to. Anyway, I will continue to enjoy... Oh, that's way too many chips. Enjoy my chips. Enjoy the rest of my day. And I hope you enjoy your day too. Whatever it is that you're doing, unless you're watching this at nighttime, and then you're watching this at night, and then what? You go to bed, right? And then we wake up, and we do the same thing tomorrow. So, the invite is always there to get in contact with me if you need extra help. Otherwise, until next time.